Before we jump into today's episode, I am so excited to be able to tell you that my debut book, Optimal You, Supercharge Your Energy, Strengthen Your Immunity, is now published. Optimal You is a groundbreaking guide uncovering the 8 pillars of health for supercharged energy and strengthened immunity to optimize your health and extend your health span. Delve into evidence-based strategies to optimize nutrition, balance your lifestyle, reduce toxin exposure, and address root causes of health imbalances. It includes a 14-step anti-inflammatory nutrition blueprint to supercharge your mitochondria and fortify your immune system. Plus, you get my 4 lifestyle S's: sleep, stress, strength, and social, that form the foundation of optimal well-being. On top of all that, when you buy the book, you get access to a special area on the website that gives you all the resources, plus recipes and guides that we talk about within the book. You can empower yourself with practical tools and insights to embark on a transformative journey towards Optimal You. Head over to optimalyoubook.com to get your copy now, or you can get your copy from Amazon worldwide or your local bookstore. When you've got your copy, don't forget to share on social media, tag me in it at good_health, GOODE, and use the hashtag OptimalYouBook. I can't wait to see what you think of the book, and I really hope that it brings you lots of health and wellness. Now let's head to today's episode. Welcome to the Good Health Podcast. I'm your host, Nicole Good, a certified functional medicine practitioner, registered nutritionist, and author. In this podcast, we delve into the world of energy and immune health and wellness with positivity, from optimal health and energy to stress and burnout, right through to immune conditions such as thyroid and autoimmune disease. We deep dive into functional medicine, nutritional medicine, and lifestyle medicine, as well as the personal stories of our amazing guests, from Olympians to famous faces and guest experts from all different parts of the health and wellness world. It's time to stop letting your health hold you back and become the optimal version of you. Don't forget to come and join the conversation on Instagram at good_health, that's GOODE, or visit the website nicolegoodhealth.com to find out more. Welcome to today's episode of the Good Health Podcast. I'm Nicole Good, functional medicine practitioner and registered nutritional therapist, and I'm your host. Today, I'm joined by special guest Heather Rosa. Heather is the Dean of the Institute for Optimum Nutrition. It's where I went as a student. And this year, the education charity is celebrating 40 years of excellence in personalized nutrition training. Heather is a pioneer in the field. She graduated from ION in 1985 as one of the first trained nutritional therapists. In 1989, she led the first degree in nutritional therapy at the University of Westminster and led the development of the profession's national occupational standards. Heather's passionate about educational standards within nutritional therapy and continues to advocate for the profession's growth by bringing training to medical and allied healthcare professionals. Her interests include evolutionary biology and nutrition, mitochondrial health, including the role of light, and metabolic health, including the use of ketosis. Heather oversees ION's courses validated by the University of Portsmouth, which include degrees and the graduate diploma in integrative functional nutrition. It's the first of its kind for medics, allied healthcare, and CAM professionals that includes optional clinical practice training. ION also provides CPD and credit-bearing short courses. Today, we're going to be discussing the field of nutritional therapy, the advances that we've already made within the field, and the advances that are yet to come. Amongst other things, we'll look at the role of nutritional therapy in healthcare within our system and how the training is helping to bring this profession to the forefront of our healthcare system. With that, let's jump straight into the conversation with Heather. Okay, so Heather, welcome to the Good Health Podcast. It's great to have you here today.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to the questions.
Let's just start off with sharing a little bit about your background and what led you to your role as the Dean of the Institute for Optimum Nutrition, because that's how I know you. That's where I studied and that's how we met. So that's sort of the role I know you in. But tell us a little bit about your background and how you got there.
Oh, how long have you got? Try and make it as short as possible because I am in my 60s now. So I, like most nutritional therapists, I came to study because I had been very unwell myself and mainstream medicine had no answers for me. And I discovered his health magazine and read it from cover to cover avidly every month and used it to start to put myself back together again. It was in that magazine that I actually saw an advert for Holland and Barrett, for assistant managers and managers training for Holland and Barrett. So I decided that yeah, I'm interested in all this health and health food and things. I'll do that. So I started work for Holland and Barrett, and I worked for them for probably about 6 or 7 years, eventually becoming a shop manager and then a trainer of their advisory staff that they then back in the day put in all of the shops. It was from that I decided that actually I needed a proper qualification. So I saw an advert for the Institute for Optimum Nutrition, and I think it was the second year that ION had run. I was up in Manchester at the time and went down for an interview to London. In fact, I'd got the wrong day. They still saw me and said, yes, of course, you can come on the course. And I was what was called a satellite student. So I used to receive in the post all these papers and audio tapes. I used to sort of virtually live in Manchester City Library doing my assignments, etc. And then once in a blue moon going down to London to sort of like a big seminar. I'm a serial non-completer of courses. In my final year, I decided to disappear to Turkey and work as a tour guide.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I'd actually shipped out all my books and all my assessments and things to finish, but of course I hadn't got round to it. And I picked up a group from Dalaman Airport, and I was sat at the front of the tour bus with this lovely lady. And I was asking her, what do you do? And she said, well, I'm trying to complete this course at the Institute for Optimum Nutrition. It's amazing how the universe works.
Small world, yeah.
Yeah, totally small world. And actually, one of the companies I was working for was called Small World, believe it or not. I said, well, I bought all my things out to finish. I've only got to write up my cases. She said, well, I'm here on holiday for 2 weeks, Heather. Finish it and I will take it back. And she did. That's how I sort of started as a nutritional therapist. But I realized quite soon that practice wasn't my forte. I'd originally started training as a phys ed teacher and environmental science teacher for secondary school before I became unwell. So I've always loved education. So really, I found my way back into education and worked for a smaller organization and then was headhunted to a larger organization in Surrey, Rayworth International, and worked there for, I can't remember how many years. And during that time, built the nutritional therapy because it didn't exist at that point. That's why they wanted me to come along, and developed the relationship with Surrey and also with the University of Westminster, because they were running courses that potentially my graduates could go on to. It was in meeting with the head of course at Westminster who had set up complementary medicine, acupuncture, herbal medicine, chiropractic, homeopathy, and they didn't have nutritional therapy. So he invited myself and several others to come along. And we set up the degree program at the University of Westminster, which I then led for, I think, nearly 16 years. And in the sort of last final few years, we started to take ION graduates into the final year of our degree. So developed back my relationship with ION. Yeah, when the government changed all the funding for higher education and it became problematic to have courses as expensive as clinical practice training, the university removed the courses. And at that point, there's me thinking, where am I going to go? What am I going to do? And the Institute for Optimum Nutrition said, we need a new dean. That's 10 years ago, started at ION, and with the specific brief to bring the profession and ION to degree level. And at that point, it had a foundation degree with the University of Bedford, Luton at the time. So yes, and that's where we developed our relationship with the University of Portsmouth, first through their work-based learning department, and then actually to validating the degree and the graduate diploma and all of the credit-bearing short courses that we run.
Yeah, because this has been quite a new thing, hasn't it? I know it was all happening while I was there. This has been quite a big evolution for ION, hasn't it? Quite a big development.
It has. I mean, it has been for the whole profession, because at that point, all of the profession, to maintain CNHC registration and BAMP membership, had to move to becoming degree awarding. So for ION, who are a charity, we're a charity, that meant finding a partner university to validate us. And that's not uncommon. Some of the other providers in nutritional therapy are partners with universities and others sit within universities.
And how does ION contribute, do you think, to the field of nutritional therapy? I mean, we've talked about the role in bringing it up to sort of the
Mhm.
level, or bringing it up to degree awarding level. What makes ION sort of unique, do you think, in the nutritional therapy field?
I think our flexibility
Hmm.
is number one USP. The other, because we run courses that can be built, that can be credit stacked, which means particularly for people who are working or who've got children or have got dependents, it means that they can stage their learning. It also means if they've been outside of education for quite a long time, they can dip the toe in the water, see how they get on. And if they get on, they can do the next set of modules. And then if they like what's happened at the end of that, they can do the next set of modules. So it's a buildable course and courses, and nobody else has that approach. We also had the first fast track top up for the profession so that those with diplomas could come and finish with a degree by doing the final year of the degree. And we also have the only one of its kind in the country, which is a graduate diploma in integrative functional nutrition for medics and allied healthcare professionals, with a clinical practice module that allows them to fast track into registration and membership with BANT as well. So it's a place that allows for innovation because it's not tied to the infrastructure of a large university where you have to go through multiple committees. We can make decisions, and our university responds very quickly to our decision making. That allows us to be very flexible and very dynamic. The others are that we're very student centered. We listen to our students. A lot of the changes that we make to the courses and the delivery are through the student voice and through their feedback on their student experience. It's like a family. It's like you never leave.
Yeah, I still have to this day my ION WhatsApp group, which is the group that my graduating year, anybody who wanted to join in the graduating year, this was just a student thing. We set it up, and we're still all in that group. There's messages every single day. Everybody's chatting and talking about cases, and and that sort of community.
And I like to call our graduates scholar practitioners because truly that's what you are. You have to learn the critical appraisal, the use of research, evidence-informed practice, the sciences, pharmacology, etc., pathophysiology, but you also have to learn the art of being in clinical practice as well. And that's a lot, actually. If you think about a geography degree compared to a nutritional therapy degree, that's a lot more that you actually have to hold and learn. So our students are amazing in how they manage their lives and how they manage their course and how they support each other. And as you say, support each other when they go out into practice, because we're still quite a relatively small community of nutritional therapists. It is a collaborative learning environment that we try to foster. We're very supportive. We want our students to succeed. So our educational approach, the pedagogy behind what we do, is all about student engagement and student achievement and trying to get people through.
There was a whole mix of people when obviously I can only talk to my year group. Within my year group, there was people who were straight out of school, people who were going back as mature learners, as they call us, which I didn't like. There was people who were working, people who had families. There was a complete mix. Distance learners, people who were going into it in more, obviously we have to go in for the clinical practice, we had to go down that, but people who were doing more distance, people who were there more in London. And there was a complete and utter mix, and it worked for everybody in their own way. For me, the clinical practice, because obviously when I was coming back to it, so I'd done neuroscience at university, I'd done a law degree, so I was used to studying. I'd done a lot of studying, but I was coming back into study. But for me, choosing the course when I was looking at the different courses, it was clinical practice for me that led me really to nutritional therapy as opposed to a nutritionist degree, a registered nutritionist degree, because I wanted the registered nutritional therapy. I wanted the clinical aspect. And maybe that came from I did clinical work on the neuroscience degree. So I love that side of the work. I knew that was an aspect that I liked. That's really the main difference, I guess, between sort of a registered nutritionist degree and registered nutritional therapy degree.
There's no clinical practice in an AFN accredited degree. So the only two clinical practice professions in the UK are dietitians and nutritional therapists.
Yeah. And that was what led me to the nutritional therapy and And I mean, as soon as you start looking at nutritional therapy, ion just comes up as
I'm glad to hear that.
yeah.
I'm glad to
And I
hear it.
did look at lots of others, but that was the one for structure wise, and it was actually the flexibility as well, as you've mentioned, that sort of led me to choosing it.
And the other thing that's quite different about the degree at ION is that we come from a functional medicine approach, from seeing the body as an integrative whole and more than the sum of its parts within its environment. And previously, when I was at Westminster, we taught everything separately, the sciences separately, the pharmacology separately, the nutrition separately. But right from the start of the design of the degree at ION, what we decided to do was walk the talk, so that you're always seeing the client as a whole, and we integrate the nutrition with the science. So I think that's one of the biggest differences in this particular courses.
I totally agree, because before I did nutritional therapy, so I'm a bit like you. I came from having health problems into this. That's how I got back into doing the health stuff. And I'd found nutrition and functional medicine for myself. So before I started nutritional therapy, I already knew that post-grad, I wanted to do functional medicine. I wanted to do more on that wavelength of whole body work. The clinical practice pulled me over to nutritional therapy, and then it was the functional medicine base of ION that pulled me towards that course, because I knew that was the sort of the road I wanted to go down, of that whole body holistic approach. And it was the only one I found. I mean, I don't know whether I haven't obviously looked at courses in recent years, but when I was looking, certainly it was the only one I found that really had that heavier focus on that sort of functional medicine approach.
And Jeff Bland is 75 now? It was being at his first visit to the UK to lecture that I discovered the functional medicine side of things. I mean, I was there poised with my pen as he put one acetate after the other in quick succession of papers onto the overhead projector, and my jaw was on the ground. I was like, oh, this is what I've been waiting for. The putting it all together. That was one of those moments for me in my development, in my understanding of where nutritional therapy was going to be heading.
You know, on that, you've talked a little bit there about the changes over the years and how things have changed.
I've got another one for you, actually. I've got another aha moment, which is quite key in the development of our profession. Is that I used to work at a cancer rehabilitation centre, which was basically like a hospice, but people did not stay there. And I had a client one day who a young girl could literally just about walk to the chair in the lounge to sit and have a conversation with me. And she started off incredibly defensive. She had liver cancer and her prognosis was not good. So we were talking weeks, not months. And she just blurted out, I want to eat some meat. Yes, that's absolutely fine. I found an organic butcher's. I'm only going to have a little bit. And she'd been so scared by what she'd been told by various practitioners that in this relationship, she was asking my permission to spend the last weeks of her life enjoying that life. Up until this point, we were not taught clinical practice. It was only theory on the courses back then, because clinical practice is incredibly expensive and the training providers were all private at that time. And it cost a lot of money and the organisation to get clients and,
Yeah, it's invaluable though. I just think it was the most valuable part of doing the study was the clinical practice.
And at that moment, it made me realise that the most dangerous thing we do as practitioners is not the supplementation, not the change in diet. It's the conversation that happens and the dynamic within the conversation. And quite soon after that point, I was involved in the development of the profession and the National Occupational Standards. And I was actually the convener of the nutritional therapy profession at that time as well. But anyway, I remember constantly talking about we need to have clinical practice within the training, and certain training providers going, no, they can learn that when they go out there. And I ended that organisation and said, basically, it has to go to the practitioners. The practitioners have to be the professional body. You cannot leave it with the training providers, because the training providers' bottom line will always be money and profit. You have to have the profession. And that was the sort of slow beginning of what we have now, which is BANT, which is the profession run by practitioners for practitioners. But it was at that point that we started to sort of talk about clinical practice. And then when we set the National Occupational Standards, which I was the convener of, both sets of, that's when clinical practice was written into our profession's training. So it was all due to this lovely young lady in consultation, giving me that moment of illumination and reflection.
Yeah, and it's true. It's that the conversations are so important, and the clinical practice, I think, was just invaluable. I think even just from the point of view of, yes, you do learn. Of course, you learn more once you go out there and you're practicing.
Absolutely.
Of course you do, because it's like any job that would be the same. But with the clinical practice, you go out there feeling that you know how to do this. You know how to be in clinic and work with clients and do that side of the work. And I think that's invaluable. What about misconceptions around nutritional therapy? Because there is a lot more integration between, I mean, I work with a lot of wonderful doctors who are very keen on having a holistic approach and having us working with them. I was talking to somebody this morning who's got thyroid, autoimmune thyroid, so she's got Hashimoto's, and she'd been to her doctor and they've given her levothyroxine. They haven't done a full thyroid panel, so they don't really know what's going on with the thyroid. She's not feeling any better. She's still gaining weight. She went back and they just said, she sort of said, like, what can I do? Can I work on nutrition? And all this. And they said, oh no, don't do any of that. Just take Ozempic. That was kind of the response. So there's still that side of reluctance to take that sort of approach, even though there are some wonderful doctors I work with who do take that approach. But what do you think are those sort of misconceptions around it?
I think there's a lot of misconception because of the way doctors and allied healthcare professionals are trained. We have GPs and allied healthcare professionals on our graduate diploma. They've made that aha moment, which is quite something. But the nature of the training, it's not the person necessarily, it's the nature of the training which focuses them into this way of looking and working. So yeah, there still is resistance in places, but less resistance than 40 years ago when I entered this profession, where we were sandal-wearing hippies that wanted wholemeal bread.
Yeah.
It has changed a lot. I was last year at the British Society of Lifestyle Medicine conference in Newcastle, and I've seen that conference go from 300 attendees to last year 2,000 plus attendees. And I ran a workshop, and I mean, literally, they had me there for 2 hours longer than I should have been with all the questions. They're hungry. They want fulfillment in their role. They want to see their patients get better. Sadly, many of them want to leave the NHS because it doesn't allow that to happen. It is changing, and that's just been wonderful to see. Quite quickly now, it's changing quite quickly now, and particularly as more people went over to America to do their IFM. Like Rangan Chatterjee, and of course he had his television program, and that opened up the world to a lot of people as well. And now you've got podcasting and Instagram, and that really has exploded the message of seeing your client as a whole, really as a whole person, and that nutrition is fundamental to the function of every cell in the body. It is the conversation that is had with the DNA is through food. So yeah, I think it is changing, and there's never bloody revolution in these things. It's always evolution, and I think that evolution is speeding up.
Yeah, which is good. It's good to see. Where do you see the future of nutritional therapy going? Are there any big changes that you see coming, or is there any changes that you think need to come still?
We have so much to learn in nutritional therapy. There is this phenomenal amount of learning that takes place to do the job that you do. And it's too much for an undergraduate curriculum. I think also that we've lost sight sometimes of food and the practical side of things, with trying to get all the science in and the complicated stuff that we do with supplementation and testing. And my vision would be, if I could sort of start the whole thing again with hindsight, I would have, like the Americans do, an undergraduate degree which focuses predominantly on food and coaching and the understanding of food, how it's produced, how you cook it, how you source it, how you get people to eat well. I would have that as the undergraduate curriculum, and then I would put the testing and the supplementation use, the more advanced practice, into master's level. And I would also integrate more lifestyle into it. Because we come from a naturopathic origin, I would like to see a few more of the naturopathic tools used in nutrition, and like hydrotherapy and and cold therapies, a lot more on sunlight and circadian rhythm, and a lot more on movement and stress management that we have at the moment. And I think that would make an amazing undergraduate curriculum.
Yeah, because at the moment that's almost backwards to that in a way, because we did all the advanced stuff at first, and a lot of the lifestyle stuff you do it on the degree, but a lot of the into the particularly into the other things, like you said, like, you know, cold water therapy, a lot of that has come from postgrad training.
I would put it up front, because you can do wonderful things with diet, but if the person has got the wrong circadian rhythm, you know, their circadian rhythm is out, that's one of the major conversations that the environment is having to the mitochondria and the DNA. So how powerful when you put the two together. And I would have students do a lot more experimentation on themselves, like they do in psychology degrees, for example, getting you to try diets and see what the lived experience of that is, so that when you are in front of a client, you're authentic. You know how to manage that journey for the client, which will be different for every client.
Yeah.
And that takes you into sort of, you know, group practice and different ways of practicing as well. So I think there's a lot that can be developed still within the education of nutritional therapists. But I'm always humbled by the effort and the sheer will of students to graduate as nutritional therapists, because it is a curriculum that is stuffed full of learning and skills development. I have PhDs telling me, and the doctors telling us, that it was harder than what they did.
Yeah, it's a lot more. I think it's a lot more scientific than people expect it to be. I think a lot of people think, oh, I'll go and do a nutrition degree. I know a lot of people I spoke to that was sort of like, it's a lot more scientific than I was expecting. I was quite lucky in that sense, because I didn't do the I know you have the I don't know what it's called now, but the foundation access.
Science access course, yeah.
I didn't need to do that because I'd done the neuroscience. So I'd done, you know, biochemistry and all of those things within neuroscience. So I'd already done a lot of that. But I know for the people who hadn't previously done that sort of scientific training, that a lot of them that did the science access just said that was invaluable for them, because it was so much more scientific than they realized it was going to be. So having that science access and getting that sort of basic knowledge first was really, for them, they said, was really, you know, invaluable. And even coming from me, having done the science before, I don't know how I would have coped with it had I have not done the science and not done a science access, just going straight into it. It's a lot more scientific than you realize.
And you can't these days. You actually have to have that science background to come in.
Yeah. Which I think is necessary. I think completely right. What about, we're talking about nutrition. You've talked about the importance of food. You've said, you know, that's where you would kind of start. What about gut health? Because the gut health, the microbiome, that sort of side of things has exploded. Even in the last 5 years or so, clients would come to me and they'd, you know, be like, what's the microbiome? And everybody knows. As soon as you sort of say the gut, they're like, oh, right, do we need to look at the microbiome? You know, everybody seems to know this word and they know about it. What's your opinion on the importance of the gut and the microbiome, and where do you see that side of it growing now that people are becoming more aware of it?
I think that's really interesting, because I've taught 2 classes this week, one to band members, students, and one to our own students. And just for the listeners, I've been through quite an evolution in my experimentation with nutrition and different models of nutrition, dietary approaches. Everything from being sort of hardcore vegetarian when I was younger and not serving my health at all for 6 years, even though I knew what I was doing and combining all the proteins and everything properly, it was just not a sustainable diet for me and caused me a lot of problems, through to now where I'm actually sitting here and in a deep state of ketosis. My diet I would describe probably as keto carnivore, with very little plant material in it at all, probably more in the summer than in the winter, hardly anything. I would say my carbohydrate intake fluctuates between 0 and 20 grams a day. So that's where I am at the moment. And that's made me look at the research on the microbiome now through a different lens, because a lot of people will say to me, you're destroying your microbiomal diversity. You're going to cause yourselves problems for later on in life. And as an academic, I sort of sit there and go, well, we have to look at what our ancestors ate. Evolutionarily, we are born into ketosis. Even, you know, modern babies are born into ketosis, but evolutionarily, we would be metabolically flexible, able to be in ketosis for long periods of time during starvation, etc., and metabolically flexible enough to use the carbohydrate when it was around, although there wasn't so much around then because we've now selectively hybridized and genetically engineered fruits and vegetables to be much more palatable and bigger, etc., and sweeter, etc. So I always say, well, a lot of the microbiome research is done on standard Western diet. It's not done looking at what happens when you move to these other types of diet. My microbiome is quite different to what the standard microbiome should be. But in research as well, people who have this diet where they've looked at the microbiome, their health markers are flourishing. Mine are as well, flourishing. My brain firing on ketones is incredible. But my microbiome is completely different. Now, is that a problem? I don't think it is. I think there's a lot more we need to learn about the sort of flexibility and the diversity of the microbiome in different situations, and that there is not one approach to microbiome health. My diet is 3 parts fat to 1 part protein. So my gut wall is being fed directly with butyrate and with glycine and other amino acids. It doesn't need necessarily the microbiome to be breaking down fiber to produce the butyric acid that then is used by the colonocyte. So there are other ways that the gut can work and can work very efficiently. So yeah, I think there's a lot more to be learnt by now doing, research in these groups like the keto group, the carnivore group, etc. Chris Palmer, they're all using ketogenic diets in bipolar, Alzheimer's, schizophrenia. And alongside that, they are looking at the microbiome as well. And the microbiome is quite different, but these people are flourishing. So obviously, that microbiome seems to work for human health. We just need a lot more research. I don't fear that at all. If I was unwell, then I would change what I'm doing.
It's what we always say. There's no one size fits all. People sort of say to me if I'm doing sort of inquiry calls and things like that, and they're talking to me about sort of working with me, they're like, are you going to tell me that, I've got to be vegetarian, or are you going to tell me that I've, got to eat meat? And it's like, you don't have to do anything. I'm not going to force you to, especially when people find out at a party, like what you do,
I never tell people.
And they find out what you do. The first thing is, right, which diet should I do? And it's like they want the one answer of, should I be on ketogenic? Should I be on plant-based diet? And they just want the one answer. And even for the one person, that might shift over our lifetime. It might be that at certain points in our life, a different type of diet, be it just our natural life cycle, i.e., women through hormones or, things like that, or be it through health conditions, which for me, that's how it started, health conditions. Even over your lifetime for each individual, that diet that works for you can change.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to do now is I'm trying to preserve the health that I've built, because the prognosis for me and the conditions that I have is that, I will die earlier rather than later. And I've already passed all the markers, which is absolutely brilliant, of prediction for dialysis and all sorts of things like that. I'm 20 years past all of those predicted timeframes, which is absolutely wonderful. But what I want to go into my old age with is a brain that functions. Number one, a brain that functions, and then a body that is strong, that I'm not going to fall over, break my hip and die a year afterwards. I kayak, I do a lot of walking. I love to be outdoors and in nature and watching the sun come up and watching the sun go down, and compress the morbidity to literally the smallest part of the end of my life.
Yeah, because I think I read a stat the other day that said, I can't remember what percentage it was, but it was a very high percent. It was like 60 or 70% of people will spend the last 16 years of their life in chronic illness as opposed to in health.
That's a long time to be in a sort of depressed, desperate state. And I've still got a way to go. Still got to keep lifting the heavy weights. I'm doing my jump training. Thank you very much, Dr. Stacey Sims and others.
But health is a journey, right? It's not just something that we do and then forget about. And that's another thing I think clients always say is, how long do you think I'm going to need to do this? And okay, if that question is about, a particular thing that you are doing or a particular thing you're working on, maybe you can give a bit more of an answer to that. But how long am I going to have to work on my health? Do you ever really not need to work on your health?
Exactly. This is the temple for my soul, for my spirit.
The goal is always to send them out there with the tools so that they can continue to work on their health ongoing.
And that's what I find exciting about our subject area is that it's constantly changing. There's new research. I mean, every day I'm reading papers, I'm listening to podcasts, I'm challenging some of my perceived wisdom about what I learned years ago. And also, I'm looking again at some of the people that I worked with and thinking, actually, now I understand what was wrong with you because we have more information now.
And that's so important, is that I think the fact that we continue to learn, and the fact that we continue to learn, I think that's really important. And I think also that we are willing to accept that if we go back 5-10 years earlier when we were practicing, we may have done things that we wouldn't do now.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to forgive yourself.
And, you can't do anything about that. Science changes. That's the beauty of science. And it's one of the things I love about it. And I do think that you do find practitioners that do get sort of particular, I think maybe a little bit more maybe in conventional sort of medicine in that sort of world where they get, this is what we know and this is the way it's done. But I think, nutritional therapy, I think is pretty good at that. I think we are.
I think it's because we came up as almost the outside. Well, we came up as the outsider, which meant originally we had no rules, regulations, structures. We could basically do what we liked, which in itself is scary, but in another way is liberating. And the professional body and the regulator have to always now build the governance in, the ethics in, etc., the understanding of the boundaries of practice so that we are safe, but we still have an ethos of experimentation, of understanding the biochemistry and the physiology and the pathophysiology of disease, understanding how food works, how micronutrients work, etc., and sort of going, well, maybe that might work. And we're not using drugs, so the level of risk is tiny. And people go out there and do all sorts of silly things with their diet every day, like eat ultra processed foods.
And that's far more risky than anything.
Far more risky. Yeah.
If we're looking to the future of nutritional therapy, or, well, to be honest, to any science, to any industry, we've got to kind of think about and touch on the role that AI is now having. I guess for us in our world, we've got kind of the two aspects. We've got the digital health side, you might call it. So the trackers, these things that are tracking, the Oura Ring, bands, the Apple Watches. And then we have a bit more the AI side of things, which scares me a little bit more than the digital
health. Scares Elon Musk. So, it is scary.
It is, yeah. What's your view on this, on technology coming into as a profession?
I think if we use technology wisely, it will empower. What we need to make sure we do is work with the people that develop the technology, because otherwise we will not know the algorithms behind how the technology is actually measuring. And that's one of the frustrations with some technologies. You do not know how it's been programmed and what standards it's been programmed on. So you always have to read every result within the context of the client and other symptom patterns, etc. So, it will never tell us everything. But, I've just been speaking with a wonderful guy from America, Dan Kitteridge, who runs a charity called BioNutrient. And we at ION are part of a developing collective of charities and organizations, along with Groundswell and with Food for the Brain at the moment. We are called We Are One. We are Optimum Nutrition Education. And what they're looking at is handheld devices that you can put on a food, a real food, not an ultra processed food, but real food like a carrot, and it will measure the nutritional content of it. They're working on technology like that. They're also doing a lot of research at collecting soil samples and food samples from around America, but also around Europe and other countries as well, looking at the health of the soil and the nutrient density of food. They have a big database which is free online. And I think some of those things will force the food industry to change, because people will put their, scanner on something and go, that one's no good, that one's better, that one costs probably 2p more, I'm actually going to spend 2p more or however much more. And it may force some of the ground up to the top change in the food industry.
It's something that's something that the food quality, that sort of nutrient, soil health and all of that is something I'm very passionate about. In my book, that's not what the book's about. It's not what we're going to discuss in it. And I sort of wrote all the pillars of health. I wrote probably 2/3 of the book was written. And we'd done the full structure with the publishers. We'd sort of signed off on it and everything. And I went back to them and I was like, I can't class this as complete without putting a section in on quality of food, because it's no good me saying to people, these are great foods, these are great for this is good for this, if we're not actually talking about the quality of that food. Because a food could be, what we class as a healthy food, a good food. But if it's got no nutrients in it and it's fully sprayed with toxins and it's got no nutrients, or it's been messed with in some genetic way or what have you, it may actually not be as good a food as we think it is.
Well, soil health was quite a large part of the introduction of our cookery book that we produced for the 40th anniversary, because the soil is everything. It all comes from the soil, from the quality of the sea, the air.
On like Netflix, they've got one on the soil. I can't remember the name of that one now. Common Ground, I think it was. Piss the Ground, Common Ground. There was like Seaspiracy. Those programs are raising awareness, to the average person, because they're things that probably we might have watched because we're in the industry, but your average person on watching Netflix wouldn't have come across those sorts of programs
or concepts at all. Good food is out of the range of a lot of people, which is quite a sad state for the country to be in, unfortunately, with the rise in food banks and, the state of our economy at the moment. I'm not going to go there. The thing that I always used to say to students and also to clients when I had clients was, don't stress the client over this. They need to buy what they can buy, and the stressing will kill you as quickly, if not quicker. The thing is to do the best that you can. There is no such thing as perfection here.
That's exactly what I was just going to say. It's not about 100% either. All those little things that you do, even if you're not doing, some people sort of say, well, if I'm not doing that, is there any point in me doing anything? Yes. It's still absolutely 100% worth doing all of the, anything else that you can do, because it all adds up to benefiting your health.
Very much so. Yeah. The other thing with technology is not on the side of the technology that we use to monitor or analyze health, is in the use of technology to absent yourself from the world and constantly hit dopamine. That's, I think, is going to be a massive, massive problem. It already is a problem, but I think it's going to be an even bigger one.
Yeah, I've just done a podcast episode with another ION grad. Actually, it was in my year. So somebody that she works with children's health. She's a generalist, so she does a lot of things, but she does do a lot with children's health. And we sort of talked a lot about that dopamine addiction with screen time and like that in children. It's becoming a bigger problem all the time, isn't it?
It's affecting their ability to learn as well, and time span. To read a paper, to engage with a research paper, you need time. And what I'm finding is now that students are less able to do that. In terms of AI, it can be very useful. For example, if I'm studying a complex subject, if I use a piece of AI technology like Obsidian, which is a note taker, but it's more than a note taker. You put your notes into it, you have keywords, etc. And you may be looking at one particular subject at this moment in time, but in a week's time, you're looking at a different subject, but there may be overlap. What this piece of AI can do is look at all the notes you've taken from all the sources that you've taken them and sort of map them together like one big 3-dimensional mind map. Yeah. And when you talk to somebody like Dr. Courtney Hunt, for example, she talks about us teaching AI so that what it's actually predicating its answers on is coming not just from one side of things, it's coming from a multiplicity of different viewpoints. So, putting your work onto the web so that AI sees it and picks it up as well. But again, what we teach students to do at the moment is to use AI where it supports time in study, time in writing, etc. Grammarly is a good example of that. But to still question it.
Yes. And then you end up going down the road of a lot of misinformation out there as well, which I think is a problem in health anyway. That's another thing that we could do a whole episode on.
Well, and teaching people how to read research. I mean, a lot of the allied healthcare professionals and medics that we work with, their curriculum is so stuffed full of all the other things that they have to learn that they don't particularly learn how to read research. So it's important, if you're in our space, to be able to critically appraise research, to have a broad enough knowledge base in which to critically appraise it. And to also, as something we mentioned earlier, was to let go of some of our old ways of thinking and allow ourselves to be challenged by new ways of thinking so that we don't end up dogmatic. I had somebody on Instagram today put a comment in on our Instagram about, well, that's wrong. Saturated fat causes insulin resistance. And it was like, okay, where did you get that piece of information from? And it came back 2017. And a piece of, obviously can't read research because can't see that this piece of research, it was not just done on feeding people saturated fat, but it was done on feeding people saturated fat and high carbohydrate diet.
Okay.
And context is everything in nutrition. Saturated fat by itself does not raise insulin. But if you have a high saturated fat diet and a high sugar glucose diet, yes, it will impact, but you take the glucose away and the saturated fat doesn't have an impact.
I think that's the thing with headlines as well, isn't it? In the press, you get people that, will sort of say, oh, well, I saw a headline on X. And, when you actually sort of look at it and you read the article and then you sort of dig into actually where did they get that research from? And you then go and look at the research, which is what we would probably, we would do. The general public probably wouldn't do. You go and read the research and actually they've taken one tiny little piece and not taken it in context to what else was going on within that study or with who the study group was done on, whatever it might be. If you're reading anything, always question, where has that come from? Who's funded it as well? I think it's really important to think about who's funded the study, where's it come from, who's actually doing the study.
I mean, one of my students said yesterday, well, you're eating all this meat, what's the impact on the planet? And don't want to go there either in this podcast, but I just had to say to her, the National Institutes of Medicine or Health or something, I can't remember what I was quoting at the moment because it's out of my brain and in the past now. I was quoting that something like 8% of greenhouse gases and emissions come from agriculture. A percentage of that comes from animal agriculture. I said, well, where does the rest of it come from?
Yeah.
So why are you demonizing food production? Because we do need to eat.
Yeah.
If we get to a point where we're not producing nutrient-dense food, we have a serious problem with the future of the species, basically, because we will not be able to reproduce.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's so many more questions I could ask, but I think to kind of round things off, if there are people out there who are listening to this, who thinking this is something they want to know more about, they maybe want to study nutritional therapy, it's a career maybe that they've thought about getting into. And I think it's really important that we do raise awareness about this as a career. I think
it is a career.
When I was at school, nutritional therapy wasn't something that I even thought of as a career. It wasn't something that came up. I think it's really important that we do get that out there, that this is something that you can do as a career. It's something you can learn, you can study.
And it's a portfolio career as well. Nutrition pervades absolutely every aspect of life. So if you have a creative mind, what you can do with nutrition is infinite. It doesn't have to be just one-to-one practice. It can be so many other things as well. Like you're an author, for example.
Yeah, exactly. I'm an author. I've got a book out. I write. I do the podcast, groups, programs. I do one-to-one, and I love that. I comment, press. I work with brands. I love the fact that there's lots of different things that you can do. It's interesting. It keeps every day is different.
And you can meld it to your personal situation. If you've got young children, for example, or if you've got dependent adults, or there's so much that you can do. I would say if your shelf is full of books on nutrition and you're constantly listening to podcasts and, every time you're in the supermarket, you're looking at labels, and when somebody says something, you've got an opinion on it. This is the profession for you. It really is, because it's you get to walk your talk and you get to do what you love every day, which is absolutely amazing as a career. Yeah,
it is. What would you say if they are listening to us and they think, yes, that is me, that you've just described me? What would you suggest they do to sort of get started to look into the industry?
I would go to the BANT website, because it has all the training providers who are recognised by the professional body and by the regulator in the UK. So I would go there. Well, that means that, if you choose one of those courses, you're on a course that is accredited and it meets the national occupational standards, etc. And then I would look at how you want to study. So, for example, ION is fully online, which means that, you can be at home. You don't have to spend money on travel. You don't have to childcare, those sorts of things. Is that something that, would fit with you as well? Do you have sciences? Do you have the equivalent of a biology A level or similar qualification? Because we take mature students, we always look at combinations of study and everything. If you haven't, then you do need a science access course. And those science access courses hold your hand and take you through to where you need to be in your understanding to start a degree. I would also look at the sort of flexibility, part-time, full-time. Can you try? What can you do as you're training? So, for example, at ION, once you finish the first level of the degree, you actually become a dietary educator, which means that you can go out there into the world and start using the dietary side of your learning. So you can earn while you learn, and then you do the supplementation and the testing in the next 2 years, and then your clinical practice. Yeah, just the vibe, the feel. You shouldn't ever be pressured by a training provider to join them. You should never pay for a course, a 3-year or 4.5-year part-time, 5-year part-time course all in one go. Don't ever do that. That would be my other advice. We would never ask you to at ION because life changes for mature students and also younger students as well, which means that, you can take time out, you can opt out, you can leave without, taking a lot of debt with you. We only want to take onto our courses those people who have this passion, like yourself, to want to study, because it is a challenging study, nutritional therapy. So I would say, listen to the support you're going to get. How will you be supported on a course? And if you're a medic and allied healthcare professional, then you shouldn't necessarily be doing an undergraduate course. You need to be doing a graduate or postgraduate course. So those are the courses that you would look at, because what happens on those courses is we recognize your prior learning and you come in at a higher level. So those are some of the things that I would say.
Yeah, I spoke at the ION Open Day recently, and I've had some of the prospective students that were on that have messaged me on Instagram and things like that, asking me questions, and we're happy to help people and answer questions about what it was like. I'm more than happy to speak to people when those questions come up, and I would say challenging but hugely rewarding as well.
Absolutely, and no learning if it's not challenging is worth it. Yeah, really is. I mean, your brain should grow, your personality should grow, your compassion should grow. Your passion should grow.
Heather, thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thank you, my darling. It's been wonderful to actually get to speak a little bit about my journey, but also about the wonderful organisation that I work for as well.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Good Health Podcast. Do share the episode with anyone you think it may benefit, and help us to spread the word on all things health and wellness by rating, liking, or subscribing to the podcast. If you want more, you can listen to more episodes on your favourite podcast app, or sign up to my newsletter for my favourite tips, tricks, health advice, brands, recipes, and more at nicolegoodhealth.com/newsletter. Have a lovely week. Don't forget to hit subscribe, and I'll see you on the next episode of the Good Health Podcast.